Today we have to discuss about the China and the different nations, which the China has different kind of problems. So first of all, start with the China and US. Let's start from the US Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo on Tuesday criticized British bank HSBC for its announced support of China's national security legislation for the Hong Kong, saying it is a show of reality which has on the bank little respect in Beijing. He also said the US stands ready to help Britain with the alternatives and stands with its allies and partners against the Chinese Communist Party's coercive bullying tactics. This very US Secretary of State seems to have become addicted to confronting China, and he could not spend a day not finding fault with China. But what is disgusting is that Pompeo always labels China that US is most fit for it, which a country habitually adopts coercive bullying tactics. How many countries are under sanction imposed by the US, and how many countries has the US threatened with the sanctions? The US European allies have the right to say which country, China or the US, is coercing with the regard to Huawei's involvement in 5G development in their countries. Beijing did not say it would retaliate if they didn't use Huawei equipment, while it is Washington that publicly threatened to stop intelligence sharing with them. He tweets from the US ambassador to Germany have irritated German opinion several times. Has Pompeo forgotten all these? Washington must be clear that its overall strategic suppression of China is driven by its geographical and geopolitical selfishness. Such selfish interests are by no means equal to the interest of the rest of the Western world. Many of the US demands go against the interests of US allies, and the US is using coercion rather than moral appeal of coercion of interest to force these countries to cooperate with it. So all of these writing definitely we have taken from the Global Times from China newspaper. Now we have to discuss about China and Australia. The Chinese Foreign Ministry on Thursday urged the Australian side to recognize its problems and address it rather than point fingers at the Chinese government, which is being responsible in reminding its citizens to pay attention to safety. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison declared that Australia will not surrender its values in response to coercion from China, adding that Australia provides the best tourism and education produced in the world. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying underlined that China's travel and education alerts, based on sufficient evidence, are reminders for tourists and Chinese students to take note of the risk and arrange their plans accordingly. This is the obligation of any responsible government to protect its citizens' legal rights and interests. Where does the coercion came from? He asked. Who asked next? Acts of discrimination and violence have been reported on Australian media, and the Chinese embassy in Australia has received complaints and people asking for help. If Australia fails to or dares not recognize the obvious evidence, where does its confidence in tourism in the education products came from? Who was said? Who is the Foreign Minister? Spokesperson. Now we have to come on the China and India, but let's start some last few words with China and Australia. We urge the Australian side to face up to the problem and reflect on itself and take the actual measures to guarantee the safety and rights of Chinese citizens in Australia, who was noted. Next, aim the escalation in Russia's attacks against Chinese and Asians in Australia, including verbal slurs and violent assaults. The Chinese Ministry of Culture and Tourism issued a travel alert on June 5. The Chinese Ministry of Education followed by releasing an alert warning students not to travel to or return to Australia due to racism and the COVID-19 pandemics. Now we came on China and India relationship. The Sino-Indian War, also known as the Indo-China War and the Sino-Indian border conflict, was a war between China and India that occurred in 1962. A disputed Himalayan border was the main cause of the war, but other issues also played a role. Ladakh is a region administered by India as a union territory and constituting a part of the larger region of Kashmir, which has been the subject of dispute between India, Pakistan and China since 1947. Until 2019, Ladakh was a region of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Despite the region being nearly uninhabitable and having no resources, it remains strategically important for China as it connects Tibet and Xinjiang. Construction started in 1951 and the road was completed in 1957. The construction of this highway was one of the triggers for the Sino-Indian War of 1962. In 1914, the Tibetan government signed the Shimla Accordance with Britain, setting the South Tibet region to British India. The Chinese government denounced the agreement as illegal. High in the Himalayas, an enormous first fist fight erupted in early May between the soldiers of China and India. Brawls at 14,000 feet along their inhospitable and disputed frontier are not terribly unusual, but what happened next was no shots have been fired as the de facto border code dictates, but the soldiers have fought furiously with rocks, wooden clubs, and their hands in a handful of clashes. In one melee at the glacial Lake Penjong Tisao, several Indian troops were hurt badly enough that they had to be evacuated by helicopter, and Indian analysis said Chinese troops were injured as well. So this was a little news from the China's point of view with different countries. Hope that you will find it quite interesting, our video. Then kindly you have to like it and subscribe it. Thanks so much.